Welcome to The Feminist Romantic. I'm your host, Cara McKinnon. On this episode, I'll be talking about the writing event that takes the internet by storm every November, National Novel Writing Month, or NaNoWriMo, or just Nano. Before I get started, you'll notice that I'm using a different intro theme. I switched to using Audacity to record my podcasts instead of GarageBand, so I needed different music that wasn't an Apple loop. Check out the show notes for links to the artist. So, Nano. What is Nano? Basically, NaNoWriMo is an event where many writers get together for the month of November and try to write 50,000 words in a brand new novel. The event was started in 1999 by Chris Beatty. It has grown from a few people that he knew to over 300,000 participants in 2016, including over 70,000 young writers, sponsored by their Young Writers program. So it is a big deal. If you know anyone who is a writer, chances are they've heard of Nano or they participate in Nano. Or they're not participating in Nano this year because of something, but they either planned on it or wished that they could. There are spin-offs to Nano now as well. There's something called Script Frenzy in April, I believe it is, where people will write a movie script in a month. And there's 2 months a year now in April and July where they do something called Camp Nano. And in Camp Nano, you have a cabin where you can invite a certain number of people to join you, and you have your private message board, and it's a lot of fun. And in Camp Nano, instead of the 50,000 words for November, you can set your own goal, whether that's 1,000 words or 70,000 words. You get to set your pace, which is a nice thing because in the end for Nano, even though there are rules like you can't start writing before midnight, November 1st, your local time, and you have to finish 50,000 words by the end of November 30th, your local time, and it's supposed to be a new project and it has to be a novel. All of those are technically the rules of Nano, but the spirit of Nano is write. That you will never become a writer if you don't write. So, Nano is about getting your butt into your chair and getting words onto your page. There is a truism for authors, which is that you can't edit an empty page. And that's one of the things you have to embrace during Nano, because the idea of this month is that you just want to plow through your draft and edit later. That, yes, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have sentences that make no sense. You're going to have entire plot lines that make no sense. Characters that you're going to have to get rid of. Lots of things that you're going to do that are going to end up being wrong and taken out of your manuscript. But you wouldn't have known any of that if you never started writing. So the point is, write. Just write. Everything that you write teaches you about being a writer. Even if you try Nano and you get 10,000 words in and everything falls apart, wonderful. In my book, you just won. Maybe you can't officially validate on the Nano website, but you have won because you've found out something about yourself as a writer. You've learned something about storytelling, namely something that doesn't work, and you're ready to take that information and move on to your next project or fix what's wrong with this project. So, as long as you continue to look at your writing life as a process, Nano is great whether you get to 50,000 words or 5,000 words or 500,000 words. That's probably not achievable, but I have known people who've gone over 100,000 words. I don't know. They must write nonstop all day long. Anyway, I, by the way, am what's called a Nano rebel. I have only once or twice in my entire career of Nano followed the rules. Now, I do follow one specific rule, which is that I only count words that I write in the month of November. But very frequently, I have a project that's already going, and I use Nano as a way to get my butt in the chair and finish the project, or, make a large progression on a project that's in process. So that's technically against the rules, but I feel like that's one of those rules that you can fudge a little bit. It's not a big deal. Counting words that you didn't write in November, that's not really fair. I don't count those words. For example, right now, I have a project that had almost 10,000 words in it, and when you go look at my Nano author site, which if you want to, you can, my username is of Stars in Stone. You'll notice I have a particular word count right now. It is 17,872, and those are words I wrote this November. So the almost 10,000 that I wrote in October is not counted. So I will never break that particular rule. However, I have so many years where I did not start a brand new project for Nano, so I'm a rebel. There are some people who use Nano to write a group of short stories, which is also technically against the rules because it is National Novel Writing Month. And so if you're not writing a novel, it doesn't technically count. But again, all writing is good writing in my opinion. So if you want to write short stories, write short stories. If you want to write nonfiction, write nonfiction. As long as you're sitting down and writing, to me, that's the point of Nano. So a little bit about my personal history with Nano. I honestly can't remember the first year that I did it. I know for sure that I did it in 2001 because someone wrote an article for a school newspaper and I was interviewed for it. So based on me having that interview saved in my computer files, I know that I did it in 2001, but I sort of have a memory of doing it the year before. So maybe I started in 2000. I've claimed that on the Nano website because I'm not sure, but I think I did. But for sure, I started in 2001, and I have done it, or at least attempted to do it, every year since. Now, I haven't won very often. But the winning of 50,000 words is not, like I said, the point. The point is to write. The point is to try out new stories, to, if you're a publishing writer, to finish a story that you have due. And that's what I'm doing this year. But the first time I actually won was in 2003. I was still in school, in college, and I don't even know how it happened that year because I was taking a lot of credits, and that was the reason I hadn't won the previous couple of years. It's so busy, like close to finals in November, and it's the holidays, so I would go home for the holidays. So I don't know what happened that year. Either I just kicked everybody out of my life and sat down and wrote anytime that I wasn't in class or something. But I did actually manage to write 50,000 words in a project that I'm still messing around with. It's kind of in the back of my head. If you go look at my Nano page, you'll see that there is something that I won with in 2003 that has been reinvented for Nano 3 or 4 other times. So, yeah, that's probably my trunk novel, because all authors have a trunk novel. The thing that they've been working on since they were 13. That's how old I was anyway. And they just keep reinventing it in their head, and it will probably never actually be finished. I mean, I finished a draft of it, but then I went back and started rewriting it again. So I don't know if I'll ever actually finish it, and if I do, if it'll be any good. Because those things that you started when you were 13 are not the same things that I, at a much older age now, which I will not disclose, I'm interested in writing about anymore. And I learned a lot about being human and about the world we live in that I did not know when I was 13. So, maybe. But I have used it for a number of nanos in the past, and I have won with it at least twice. But mostly I lose. And the reason I lose is life. They picked November for reasons, but in America, November is the month of Thanksgiving. So I have a big family and we love Thanksgiving, and I lose all 4 days of the Thanksgiving weekend almost every year and am doing family things and I'm not writing. And I don't feel like it's fair to tell my family I'm going to go close myself up at my computer and write for the next 4 days and not say hi to you. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is I have 2 kids, and 2 kids get in the way of writing time fairly frequently. And somehow when the second one came along, it became exponentially more time. That doesn't make sense. You'd think it'd be twice as much, but no. Millions and millions of times more work is required of 2 children than just 1. So since my daughter was born in 2011, I haven't won Nano at all. The last time I won was 2010, and I was in grad school at that point, and I was using Nano to finish my thesis. So, yeah, I'm really got my fingers crossed for this year. I am totally above par, more than above Nano par. I'm on par for what I need to do, which is not the 50,000 words in a month, but I really need to get more than 65,000 words to finish this book. So my goal is... The Nano goal is 1,667 words per day. And my goal is 2,200 words per day, which is about 500 words more than the Nano goal. And I am on par for what I need as of yesterday. I haven't started writing today. But as of yesterday, I was on par for the extra 4,000 words that I needed above what Nano's goal is. So if I can keep that up for the rest of the month, I will finish Secret Magic. Fingers crossed. Please, God. I need to finish Secret Magic. It was supposed to be out in the summer, and then it was supposed to be out in October, and now it's supposed to be out in December, and I really need to finish it so I can get it sent off to my editors. And actually that brings me into the next thing that I was going to talk about Nano. Because one of the things that Nano gets a bad rap for is that some people have finished their 50,000 words, which isn't really a novel. That's really short unless you're writing like category romance, and even then it's a little short. Or if you're writing like a middle grade kids book. Okay, maybe then 50,000 words is a novel. But for most adult fiction and young adult fiction even, 50,000 words is a novella. It is not a novel. So what people were doing, and I think maybe in some cases still are, is with the advent of self-publishing, they would finish their book either in November or, shortly after when they got to the end of the story. And they would just put it up on the internet, either through Kindle or wherever. And that was their book. And the problem with that is, if you aren't trained as a writer, you may have like a natural genius as a storyteller, but not have the skills to make that genius come across in a way that resonates with readers. And there are people who are just that good automatically from the beginning, who, not that you can't learn from a writing class, because I think everybody could learn from a writing class, but maybe there's someone who has done a lot of extensive reading in their life and they have a really good voice. So it's totally possible to be just really good from the beginning, to have natural aptitude for it, to be like Mozart at the piano as a child and just start playing things that you've heard one time. But for the vast majority of us, we aren't born with that talent. And so these pieces were being put up on the internet and for sale that were just terrible. Just terrible. Because even those genius writers need an editor. You need someone else's eyes, and a trained someone else's eyes on your work to look at it and say, well, this is where the story sags a little bit, and you went a little too fast here, and I don't know what happened, or, this character is all wrong. You established them this way, and then at this point in the story, you need them to do something for the plot, and so you break the character that you've established. These are all very common things that happen in stories. I'm sure if you are readers, which if you're not a reader, why are you listening to my book podcast? I don't know. I'm sure that everyone who listens to this is a reader, and you've probably encountered this even in traditionally published fiction where stories have problems and editors will do the best they can. Authors can say no to editors. That's one thing. This little dirty secret of it doesn't mean you'll get published again, but you can say no to your editor. And even with an editor saying, well, this is wrong, you and your editor and your beta readers and everybody else may just not be able to find a way to fix it. And if the book is contracted and it has a cover and it's slated to be published, it might just go through with what everybody agrees is probably a problem, but nobody knows how to fix it, or that fixing it would mean basically starting from scratch, and nobody has time for that. So, these things do happen. They do get through in traditional publishing, but they're rarer because when you get to that level, you're used to taking criticism. You're used to working with your editor. You get on board a lot earlier in the process. But it's very, very common in self-publishing because a lot of people consider a friend reading it through and saying, oh yeah, that's great, as, okay, it's ready to be published. And it probably isn't. It may even be close, but authors need editors. So if you're participating in NaNo, I highly, highly recommend when you're done, first of all, self-revise first. Go back, put it in a drawer, let it rest, and then pick it up again in a couple weeks and reread it as a reader, not as a writer, and tell yourself, what parts of the story do I start getting bored at as a reader? And what can I do to fix that and make it more interesting and exciting? And do I like these characters? And yes, not all characters need to be liked. What I mean there is there something about this character that I find compelling? So it's not necessarily likability, but compelling. And things that are compelling is characters that are complex and interesting, and specifically characters that are vulnerable. Even your antiheroes and your villains need to have some kind of vulnerability to them that makes them interesting to a reader. So ask yourself all those questions as a reader of your story. And then rewrite. And maybe that takes you 4 or 5 rewrites. And when you think you're ready, go find a developmental editor. Developmental editors are basically what we just call an editor at a publishing house. That's the person who, if you're going to be traditionally published, buys your book. They have to get permission from, the various departments above them, marketing and all that stuff. But they are the ones who make the offer and buy your book. And then they will send you revision notes. And you will revise based on those notes. And there are people who will do this for you for a fee without having to be part of the traditional publishing apparatus. I have one. She's amazing. Her name's Anna Lavoie. Her company is Literally Yours Editing. And I highly recommend her, especially if you do fantasy or romance or both, as I do. If you are interested in developmental editors and would like some recommendations, you can email me, thefeministromantic@gmail.com. Let me know what genre you write, and I will send you back a list of recommendations. I also have recommended copy editors and proofreaders, which is for a later stage in the project. But if you're interested and you would like me to send you that list, I absolutely will. And just send me the email and let me know what you need. But getting back to NaNo, the editor problem and the publishing without editing problem is probably the biggest criticism of NaNo, is that it encourages the words on the page approach. But in recent years, they have definitely spent more time talking about what happens next. They have a whole series of things on the website about, so you've written 50,000 words, what's next? So they acknowledge that this is a problem and are trying to give authors tools to not just throw their work out into the world, but to make sure that it is their best work and that it's easy for readers to access their work. Because when you're a writer, you are one side, I should say, of a communication, of a dialogue. And the other side of that is your readers. And if what you are producing doesn't make sense to your readers, then you need to consider fixing it, changing it so that it does make sense for your readers. The other problem that Nano has is the everyday 1,667 words model. I've talked to people who are able to do the write everyday thing and sustain that for long periods of time and be great with that. And I've talked to other people who just can't keep that up. They burn out. And so Nano at least is only a month, but it definitely does promote this write everyday mentality. And there is a pushback in the writer community against the write everyday mentality because of burnout, because of real life, that challenges happen, things happen in your life. You can't always write every day. But I like to take up kind of middle ground here, which is that you should try to write every day. Or you should at least schedule your life in such a way that when you can, you're writing. And you make the attempt to write every day. Or if you can't write that day, maybe while you're doing something else, you can be thinking about your book. Or whatever it is that you're working on at that time. And more often than not, you should be writing. When you have the chance, you should be writing. I don't always live up to this, by the way. I just spent most of this year not writing a whole lot. I wrote a couple short stories for the anthologies that I have out. The Crazy Little Spring Called Love and Love Across the Universe anthologies that my publishing company did. And I finished the third book in my Fae of Sky series, Memories of Magic, for the spring. And once those were done, I haven't written much. And some of that has been my real life going crazy and having my kids underfoot all summer and illnesses of my own and my children and my son breaking an arm and me just getting seriously depressed about the state of the world, as many other authors are also experiencing. So yeah, I don't practice what I preach, and I should, but it's definitely the ideal to shoot for. Is if you're not writing every day, you're thinking about writing every day, and you're trying to write more often than you're not. So if those are the only two criticisms that you can level at Nano, that it maybe pushes a little hard on the words less than good words, and that it is not a sustainable activity, I don't really think that that's that horrible of a criticism. And there's a reason why 30,000, or not 30,000, 300,000 people did it last year, and that I try to do it every year. I several years in a row have said, I'm not going to do Nano this year. You know, there's too much going on in my life. And then I find myself in November going, okay, yeah, I'm going to do Nano this year. And like I said, I haven't won for years, but I come back and I do it anyway, because most years I get 30 to 40,000 words, even if I don't get 50. And this year, fingers crossed, I'm going to make it to 60, 65, 70. It would be wonderful if I could get to 70,000 words, because then I'll have lots of room to cut in the edits. You will not be hearing from me on The Feminist Romantic for the rest of this month, because I will be writing. I will also not be blogging on my Cara McKinnon blog, so if you follow me as Cara McKinnon, I will not be blogging this month because I'm writing. I will be back on December 6th to talk about revision and editing, because that's what I'll be doing for Secret Magic, if all goes well, by December 6th. I'll specifically be talking about revision, editing, and structure for romance novels, and how that's different than other things. And I have written mysteries, I have written straight fantasy, and now I've written romance, so I have a little bit of experience in different genres than just romance. And romance is different. It has different requirements. It has a slightly different structure, and we'll get into that on the next podcast on December 6th. And I'll have one more podcast in 2017, which will come out on December 20th, right before Christmas. My family celebrates Christmas. I also celebrate Yule. I'll talk a little bit about holiday anthologies, holiday romances. And I'm going to try to find ones that are a little more inclusive than just Christmas. So if you have any holiday anthologies that you know of that include other faiths, please send me your recommendations. I'm going to go look, but I don't know of any off the top of my head, and I'm very curious to read some and include those in that podcast. So yeah, please send me your recommendations at thefeministromantic@gmail.com, or you can go on my website, thefeministromantic.com, find the blog for this episode, and leave me a comment. Or you can find me at caramckinnon.com, or cara@caramckinnon.com is my Cara email, and you can send recommendations there as well. So I'd love to hear from you, and if you are a writer, I hope that you're participating in Nano. And if you are participating in Nano, that your word count is great and robust. And if it isn't, that's great too, because you're at least thinking about writing and you're putting your best effort forward. And to all of my fellow writers, butt and share, words on page. Have a happy November, and I will be back in December. Once again, I'm Cara McKinnon, and thanks for listening.